Hey everyone, today we're talking about spies. Not the tuxedo-wearing kind who order martinis wrong. No, today we're sinking into the slower, stranger world of espionage before satellites and encrypted apps. A world where spying mostly meant eavesdropping in taverns, bribing your enemy's cook, or casually rummaging through someone's papyrus scrolls while they weren't looking. And naturally, people made it worse. Let's begin in the ancient world, where secrecy was never really secret. Because when you write everything on clay tablets or wax boards, there's always some nosy servant with an excellent memory. The first thing to know is this: espionage is as old as the human urge to be nosy. Where there were rival kingdoms, there were people trying to figure out what their neighbors were up to. And in the ancient world, neighbors were always up to something. Take Egypt, for example. The pharaohs loved building colossal monuments, fighting over borders, and occasionally pretending they had divine insight into everything. But in reality, they also kept networks of informants. Soldiers posted in border towns doubled as watchmen, reporting on caravan traffic, suspicious merchants, or envoys who looked a little too curious about the Nile's fortresses. Egyptian spies didn't skulk around with coded briefcases. They were usually scouts, scribes, or even musicians. Yes, musicians. Because if you're sending a delegation into a foreign court, what better cover than a group of entertainers? Who's going to suspect the flute player? Except, of course, he's memorizing exactly how many guards the king employs, and which gates are left open after dark. Now the Mesopotamians, always efficient, always slightly paranoid. The Assyrians in particular had a reputation for brutality and an enthusiasm for surveillance. Their kings didn't just want tribute, they wanted information. A steady stream of reports flowed into their palaces, lists of enemy troop movements, intercepted letters, even gossip about which local rulers were feeling disloyal. And here's the charming detail. These reports were written on clay tablets. So yes, someone risked their life smuggling out news of a rebellion, only for it to be baked into a little brick and stored in the royal archives. Nothing says urgent intelligence like needing to fire up a kiln. Still, the Assyrians had one advantage: fear. Once people know your army skins enemies alive, they're oddly motivated to tell you what you want to hear. Let's drift over to Greece. The Greeks. So intellectual, so democratic, so constantly spying on one another. City-states like Athens and Sparta had fragile alliances, endless rivalries, and a deep love of secret schemes. Athens even had an official word for professional informers: sycophants. They weren't exactly secret agents, more like nosy gossips with government sponsorship. Meanwhile, Sparta leaned in a darker direction. They created the Crypteia, a secret police force of young Spartan men who roamed the countryside spying on and occasionally murdering helots, the enslaved majority population. This wasn't espionage in the glamorous sense. It was more like state-sponsored intimidation. But in Sparta's mind, maintaining fear was intelligence work, and when it came to military secrets, the Spartans had their famous citale. This was an early form of cryptography. Imagine a strip of leather wound around a wooden rod. The message only made sense when wrapped around a rod of the exact same thickness. To anyone else, it looked like a scrambled mess. Of course, this was only secure if your enemy didn't own a stick of the same size, which they usually did. The Persians, meanwhile, turned spying into an art form. Their empire stretched across 3 continents, and holding it together meant keeping a close watch on governors and satraps. So the kings developed what Greek historians later called the king's eyes and ears. These weren't literal body parts, though that would have been unsettling. They were roving inspectors, disguised messengers, and shadowy figures who appeared unannounced in provincial courts. Their job was to quietly observe, take notes, and report back on any treachery. The mere possibility that the king's eye might be in the room was often enough to keep people loyal, or at least loyal-looking, which is the only kind of loyalty kings ever get. Rome, of course, took spying and bureaucracy and married them into something both practical and a little ridiculous. During the Republic, Romans relied on informers, intercepted letters, and a fondness for bribing slaves. After all, who knows more about a senator's secrets than the man who pours his wine? By the time of the Empire, things had become more sinister. Emperors like Augustus and Tiberius used networks of frumentari originally. These were soldiers in charge of grain supply. But Rome, being Rome, decided, why not also have them collect intelligence, monitor governors, and assassinate people on the side? Because naturally, if someone can distribute wheat, they can also carry out a covert execution. Later, emperors expanded this system into a whole class of agents, some of whom specialized in gathering whispers at taverns, bathhouses, or gladiator games. If there's one lesson from Roman espionage, it's that spies thrive wherever people get tipsy and chatty. Now let's pause on methods. How exactly did ancient spies gather secrets? Well, in short, they used whatever worked. Eavesdropping was popular. Spies lingered in marketplaces, temples, and taverns, because human beings across all centuries are terrible at keeping things private once there's wine involved. Disguises were also a staple. Merchants were the most convenient. Cover, always traveling, always asking questions, and never out of place in a foreign city. Some spies posed as physicians. After all, what better access than tending to your rival's health, while memorizing the layout of their palace, and of course, bribery. Human loyalty has always been negotiable. In fact, many great betrayals in antiquity weren't the result of masterful spying, but of someone being offered a heavy bag of coins and saying, "Yes, absolutely, I'll open the gates for you at midnight." But there were also stranger methods. In India, for example, the ancient text Arthashastra, a political manual attributed to Chanakya, spends entire chapters describing spycraft. It recommends sending out agents disguised as wandering ascetics, fortune-tellers, or even prostitutes. The logic was simple. People confess secrets more freely when they think the listener is either holy or distracted. One favorite tactic was using spies who pretended to be holy men. Because who's going to suspect a priest of secretly reporting troop movements? Of course, this made it rather awkward for actual holy men, since rulers tended to assume all of them might be spies. And what about codes? We already saw Sparta's stick cipher. Other cultures dabbled with invisible ink, using things like milk, lemon juice, or plant sap. The trick was heating the parchment until the hidden words appeared. Effective, unless your enemy just happened to toast their bread a little too close to your letter. Some codes were hilariously obvious. The Romans liked simple substitution ciphers, like shifting every letter by 3 places, which means attack. Tomorrow might be written as www repurs. Very clever. Until the enemy realizes you've shifted everything by 3, which, given Roman creativity, usually took about 5 minutes. Now, here's the softer irony. Ancient spies weren't always sinister figures in the shadows. Sometimes they were poets, philosophers, or disgruntled relatives. Many were caught, of course, because espionage is a dangerous line of work when everyone carries swords, but their legacies linger. Without these networks, many empires would have collapsed faster. Without the gossip, bribes, and secret notes, rulers would have stumbled blind into disaster. Instead, they stumbled slightly less blind, which is really the best any ruler can hope for. And so, as you drift tonight, imagine the quieter side of espionage. Not explosions or car chases, but a man with a lyre playing in a foreign court, while counting the guards at the door, or a merchant sipping watered wine in a dusty tavern, gently guiding the drunk beside him into revealing which road the army will march. Espionage in the ancient world wasn't glamorous. It was slow, patient, and often dull, which makes it, oddly enough. So let's leave our spies in their taverns, their temples, and their caravans. They'll keep listening in the shadows.